Laura,
Okay.
you wanted to record something quickly here. You noticed something that I posted in our Slack. So we have a Slack with all of our founders. Each of them has a private channel, but then we also have a public channel where there's like lots of discussions going on regularly. Something I posted this morning or yesterday caught your eye. Why did it catch your eye? And let's talk about it.
You posted about how you noticed later stage investment firms and VCs were starting to invest earlier and earlier. And I think from being in this business with you guys for 4 years now and seeing the work that goes into actually selecting founders, there's so much more than just quantitative things that go into it. You've been in this business for 2 decades. I think it's very important for people to hear it from your perspective, why it would be difficult for later stage firms to invest in seed stage companies.
Got it. Well, so I don't necessarily think it's difficult for later stage funds to invest earlier. And I guess what I'm about to say, I'm not sure I have a really strong point of view on where I stand, but here's the rub, right? Like if you have a large fund and you're trying to figure out how can you go earlier, because who doesn't want to go earlier? You can deploy capital and get way more ownership in a business. The challenge is it comes with a lot more risk. Funds that are later stage, by my observation, are trying to figure out systematic ways to invest earlier. Like how can they almost programmatically write checks at the earlier stage to businesses? And what do they end up relying on heavily? It's data wherever they can find it. And particularly in software as a service, there's an endless number of metrics that you can measure these businesses by. And we're guilty of the same thing. We want to know all the data as real time as possible about our companies. Now, the problem is I see companies before they've even really figured out what they are, start to get pigeonholed into being or needing to be a certain kind of business just to maintain the metrics that they're being measured by at the earliest stage. And the result is that there's like little room for them to be creative and step outside of what may be the lane that they go into and just end up starting to have to go down. And I guess like an analogy I would think about is you may observe that a kid is very athletic by like age 5 or 6. Most of the science out there would say that if you like to see your kid become a professional athlete, what you really should be doing is exposing them to a broad variety of sports and focus on their kind of athleticism. Because what you rarely see are the kids that play in the Little League World Series, who are the pitcher, actually going on to play Major League Baseball. And by the same token, if all of a sudden we're taking startups and trying to find all the possible early stage companies, trying to find all the data we can on this business, their kind of SaaS metrics, their NPS scores, and like measuring them right before they've, right as they've come out of the gate, it's like saying, hey, let's start measuring this 5-year-old's VO2 max and their 40-yard dash and their deadlift. And it's like you don't even know quite what this kid's going to become yet. And all of a sudden you're forcing them to be a left-handed outfielder, and they're training just to become that. And I don't know, I think it's a challenge. And we're guilty of the same problem because we want to know what's going on inside of our businesses in real time. But as soon as we ask for that data can start to become public, and that can become data that later stage funds start to measure companies by and say, if you hit metrics X, Y, and Z, we'll just give you a check. And I just see a lot of companies needing to become a certain kind of business because they're just being measured by that. So that was what it was about.